Welcome to a new episode of Trash Can Talk podcast. And you're probably wondering, why is Brandon sitting here by himself with no guest? And the answer to that question is I just got 5 years sober. And although this isn't a sobriety podcast, I guess it's one of those monumental times. It is to me a monumental time in someone's. It's 5 years. I used to think I couldn't get 1 minute. If you ever, people know me and they've seen me are like, everyone thought I was gonna die. I don't think there's anyone, including myself, that thought I could make it 5 years. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. When you start off really early in my life, it was quite abusive, chaotic. Like many people start off with a divorce. I just was really trying to find my way through life and didn't have a lot of guidance. My father basically, did a really, really good job at raising me. Everyone involved at this point in life, I've come to realize, did the best they could with what they had to raise me. I was born in Pasadena. I grew up in LA until about 7th grade. I moved to San Diego. And about, I'd say, it got really bad, I'd say about junior year. And I started dabbling with heroin. We would smoke it, and then very quickly, I ended up shooting it. My drug of choice was heroin and cocaine in a syringe. If you didn't really have both of those, I didn't want to do it. I would do heroin just to stay well. I think around by 21, I had tried to check into my first rehab facility. Shireen from Music Cares helped me get into Cry Help around, I want to say 21. Might have been before that. And it's weird because I really, and I feel for everyone who's like, I really want to quit. Because every time that I tried to stop using, I really, really want to stop using. And I know that it looks different for a lot of people, but the ideas too that I have is like, you might think because I did heroin and I shot cocaine, I should stop using. But my original idea was to moderately use drugs, you know what I mean? Or maybe one day be able to drink. And, I went to countless rehabs, like Cry Help. I went to Acton. I went to Impact. I went to Salvation Army, Charlie Street. And I went to meetings. I never stopped going to meetings. I went to so much meetings. And it's just weird because it's like I had that desire to quit, and every time I just couldn't get it. And it's like, what happened from then to now and to where I could get it now? I had some amazing jobs. I had some super amazing experiences, tons of amazing experiences. I've done some really, 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 really cool shit. And we will get into all that on the lifetime of this podcast, because a lot of people that come on this podcast will have been in different times in my life. And already some of the people that were on it, it's like you get those glimpses and tastes of what it was like in my life, and it was miraculous. I had a beautiful, amazing life. You know what I mean? I got to do everything I've ever wanted to do. I've gotten to do. Even if I was high, sober, I mean, I've done everything I want to do. But I wanted to more concentrate on kind of like what happened, where that shift was mentally, where I was able to get out of living under a bridge on Skid Row, which I brought up a lot, is like my best thinking ended me up with me and my girlfriend living at the time, living under a bridge on Skid Row, and we lived in the bridge we were under was right across the street from the Disney Music Hall, and we had the spot where the rain drain came in, and it's like, what did it take to get from there to here, and I can't remember the last use or like the last shot. Like usually I'd have these big things, but like where I was at when I got sober is there was no scraping the money together to have some miraculous night before rehab or any of that stuff. It was just all very, very sad. I had run this company called Modshine and ran this store with a partner called the Factory Vape in Glendale on Brandon Maple. We were pretty prominent in the vape scene at the time, and that was the worst that I ever been. I was selling drugs, I was using drugs, and I had enough drugs, because I used to always think the problem is that I didn't have enough drugs to use how I wanted to use. I don't want to be sick. And at this point, I had more than enough drugs and alcohol, and I was drinking, so I'd wake up shaking in the morning, I'd have to drink, and then I'd have to get my shot, and then I'd be a little too down, so I had to smoke some crack or some crystal. Then I'd get too tweaky, and I'd take some GHB and some Xanax, and I'd be just, a mess. And anyone that saw me at that time was like, this guy's a mess, all the people I decided to surround myself with, though, that would be buying drugs or whatever, they're like, you are the man. Look at all that you have. And I was dead inside, and but it's like when you're in the disease will make everything so much more important than the fact that you're slowly killing yourself and you're dying on a daily basis, and that becomes the least important thing, and everything else around you becomes very important. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't go to rehab next week. I have a doctor's appointment on Wednesday. Well, that's if you live till Wednesday to go to that doctor's appointment. Especially now, with all the fentanyl and everything out there. But towards the end, when I started losing everything, what little I was holding on to, because I didn't make much of my life, I never had much, so anything that I had was my everything. And this time I had a pretty good, company going. I mean, it was falling apart, but to me, like with what little I had, it was a big deal, and it was hard to give it up, what my head told me. And towards the end, I started going, I tried to kill myself 3 times, and I tried to do it with like my Seroquel and drinking, and then I'd end up in the emergency room and I get 5150, and then they'd let me out and I would do it again, and I'd get 5150. Then they let me out, I'd do it again, and then I get 5150. And the idea, though, that there was something wrong in my head kind of got me. You know what I mean? Like when they're like, you're a duly diagnosed patient, so like you have mental health problems and you use drugs. Trying to kill yourself 3 times and not being able to do it was also like, I was like, that's always been my plan out of this. It's like, I'll just kill myself. Like, that's how I will get out of this bullshit. And, waking up 3 times, you're just like, okay, like, what the fuck? Like, that was the out plan. Like, what do I do now? And I checked myself into Salvation Army. Um, I feel like I did really good there. I mean, I was always on the extra duty thing, but like I'll explain what I learned from that place. Is in Salvation Army, it's a Christian based um, program, and I mean, I enjoy religion. You know what I mean? So I'm not like dead set. Like we were raised Catholic. I'm not dead set on Catholic. I'm not dead set on Christianity. I'm not dead set on Eastern philosophy. I enjoy the idea of religion. I've always liked the fact that, there's someone out there bigger than me making all this happen. And I did like the idea of you're going to go through all this to make you who you are. Eventually, I just decided, though, that it was too much. It was too much for me to handle, to go through all that I went through. And so I made the decision to check myself in the Salvation Army, be open-minded to the idea that some things need to change, and I'm going to have to change them, and kind of be willing to take that change. So while I was there, I was for as much as I could. I mean, I was crazy. You know what I mean? Like, I was coming out of mental health facilities, like a bunch of suicide attempts. They put me on Seroquel and Wellbutrin to stabilize me. So taking it as prescribed, I think it did kind of have that stabilization effect. I was able to do the things in Salvation Army and like make the movements. I just didn't do them right. And I mean, I guess too that there wasn't a lot of people there that were like cheering me on to get this done. Because I mean, I got kicked out for a very stupid reason. But like I say, the great things that I took from that program was like, you made your bed. It just gave me this like, every day this is what you do, you know? And I didn't think that I was gonna make it past that. I was kind of like, oh, maybe I should always be in this life of where I have someone that tells me what I should and shouldn't do with my life. And anyways, I get kicked out and I have 4 months sober. I'm walking home to Burbank and I'm walking through the park and the cops come and arrest me. I had a warrant out for my arrest because at the vape shop I was doing all kinds of crazy things. I get put in jail. I basically, in jail, I have this big case over my head for what happened at the vape shop, and they want to give me all this time. I already have a strike. I had tons of possessions. I had a very extensive criminal record when I went in there, and I kind of came to the fact that I had enough God in me, but not program, but enough God from being at Salvation Army and attending the meetings there. I wasn't working the steps yet. And I had enough program, and like I said, I had enough program and I had enough God in me to kind of like guide me into being like, all right, this is His will, not my own. I'm sober, and maybe what I should do is go to prison, and then I'll have all this time sober by the time I get out. And I thought, that sounds awesome. I was like, that's the plan. I got in there. I was working out. When I left Salvation Army, I was like over 300 pounds. I got in there. I started working out. I started, feeling good about myself. I'm drinking tons of water, eating tons of working out, and I started to gain this like very close connection with God, a God of my own understanding. And I started to pray, and there was a thing that happened in the dorm. We had to like beat this guy up because it's just the thing you got to do. I got kicked out. I got put in the hole, and I had this crazy spiritual experience. I tell a lot of people. I mean, I didn't hear the voice of God this time, but I went into a cell. They moved me out of the other dorm I was in, which was like a school dorm. And they kept moving me all over, and it'd been like a full day since I've eaten. And I remember going to this cell, I hit my knees and I said, God, if you were there, I'm so hungry, please give me food. The door went crick, 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 crick. And they're like, O'Connell. You come down and it's called a jute ball. They just put like all this warm food into like a bag, and then they give it to you and eat, and that was the best meal I've ever had in my life. I completely believed from that moment on that there was a power greater than myself. I don't know if you've been to LA County Jail. It's just like, if you don't get something, you just don't get it. It's like if they give you a roll and like there's no boxers and socks in it, like unless you get a cool trustee, it's not like anyone's gonna come really bring you the boxers and socks. And it might have changed now, but like, I mean, LA County Jail, you have, from when I went, you had nothing coming. And I mean, it was just, it was an amazing feeling, because it's like, you know that God's there. And I'm sure that maybe there was more than enough things too to kind of like let me know that God was there. But like in that instance, I said, God, if you are there, show me now. And I think too at that instance is I was ready to receive that and to not overlook it. And I never have. The crazy thing is I was in jail for 4 months, a little over 4 months. And they basically give me this deal at one of the court dates, and they're like, we'll give you 16 with half and a split. You could get released today, you know, to plead guilty to the charge. I mean, I just took it, you know, and I got out, and it was around Christmas time. And I remember I went to my aunt's house, and it was Christmas, and I was like, you know, I got like 9 months sober, the Salvation Army jail, and I thought the world at 9 months owed me something, and I've come to realize that, you know, until you lose that mentality, then it's also really hard to receive when you think that everyone owes you. And my brother taught me this great lesson, which I didn't think too highly of him at the time for doing it. But he packed my bags up. He's like, you're not going to stay at your Aunt Kathleen's. Where are you going to go? And I was like, well, where am I going to go? And he dropped me off at Skid Row. It was the only place I needed to go. And I went and used the missions. There's missions down Skid Row. So I would line up at like 7 p.m. and then or it's earlier, I think 5:30 or 6. I'd line up. They let us in by 7 p.m. They'd give you a mattress and a blanket. I would set it down. I would go in there, I'd lay on the mattress. That would be deflated by the time I woke up, so I'd be laying on the concrete floor on the mission in San Pedro, and my blanket would usually be stolen by someone else. And I did that every night for like a couple weeks. When I woke up in the morning, I made my way over to, there was a meeting spot. I can't remember the name. I don't know why I can't remember the name right now. Someone's gonna, it's not, anyways, they had meetings there all day. They had computers you could use and a phone. And I used that to look for jobs every day, and I was willing to do anything. So I didn't want to stay at the mission. I went and got GR, I got food stamps, and then I was now looking for enough money to get myself out of homelessness. So one day we were downtown, and it's in the warehouse district. I moved all these boxes, I think they were boxes of suits, off trucks into the back of a building. And I think the guy gave me like 150 bucks. So I was like, I have 150 bucks in cash. I'm gonna stay at the mission, eat the food there, eat food off of Skid Row, not spend anything. I'm gonna keep my GR. So I have 250, I think was GR, and 150 now. And I was like, I'm gonna start looking for options on where to move into sober living wise. I knew where I wanted to go, but I mean, that place was full, and it was gonna be a while till anyone moved out. I ended up going to this one, I think it was like Azusa, and my godmother helped me get into it. And I mean, it was the worst place, and the guys there were assholes, but it was whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I had that like PMA going anyways, like hardcore. Like you couldn't phase me. You know, I think too at the time I'm just like, I was kind of oblivious to what everyone thought about me. And you know, later on I found out, but it's not even a big deal. All these places serve their purpose. They said it was $700 to move in, and I'd have to come up with it. And I had the 250 and the 150, and then I think I did one other thing, and I think my godmother had helped me get the rest. And I moved in and I started working at my old job, which is from my first mentor and like lifelong friend Cosmo. And I started working on Melrose at a boutique selling clothes and getting that, you know, we were retail and it was on Melrose, so it was awesome. And I knew though that like, I knew what I had to do, and that was what I've never done, and that was go back to AA, go to the meetings, tie myself in, and sit down and do the steps. And that's what I did. And I did all of that stuff. I went to a meeting. I went to meetings every day. I got a commitment in the first couple years, and I did the steps. You know, and the thing that I, you know, initially, going back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't wait to be back for real. I had some things, I was like, you know, people think these things about me, but it was about saving my life. And like I said, I had that PMA. I mean, working out every day became mandatory. Drinking lots of water became mandatory. Eating as healthy as I possibly could afford was mandatory. And it was really hard though, because I was barely scraping by working on Melrose. You know, I was barely scraping by. I didn't have any extra money. I owed a ton of restitution. I didn't have credit cards. My credit was fucked. Everything. I mean, I was like destitutely homeless because I literally ruined my whole life. I had nothing, and I had nothing coming either. No one. I mean, the help was very little. The help was from people that were actually in my same circumstances. And when you're new, I suggest, you know, you find the good people, the people like me who've been through this kind of stuff, and they're willing to help you. And you find your crew, and you guys just make it happen. Like I remember too, we were in sober living, and we each would get something to put in the food. Or my roommate would be like, hey, I have food in the fridge. He'd lend me $1.50 for the bus. You know what I mean? Like, and these are lifelong friends that I'll always have. So I got into the rooms and I picked my sponsor and I started working the steps. And I worked the steps like my life depended on it. I couldn't wait to like do more step work. You know what I mean? Almost to the point where it was like, I think my sponsor was like, this guy's annoying. And you know, 1, 2, and 3 is as far as I honestly ever got doing the steps. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, our lives become manageable. I knew that. 2, came to believe that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. 3, decided to turn our will and our lives over over to a power greater than ourselves. And that's where I got. And this 4th step now that I did was, I mean, it was insane. I learned so much from doing step 4. So I wrote down all these people that I have resentments against and everything, and then we just decipher the resentments. And what I got to do is I got to look at my part in it. I did it wrong. I remember I started reading it to my sponsor, and I had to go back and redo it. But I mean, the real cool thing about it is like looking at the resentments, looking at my part, and then starting to see the patterns. So the patterns in how I interact with people that lead to these bad results was my map on how not to interact with people from that point on. You know, what I really realized too is being, you know, that I was a very selfish, self-centered. I thought the world owed me everything. I was the victim, and that's how I interacted with people. So the relationships that I had with people, even though I still kept these friendships and everything, when I became more self-centered, more like that, more thinking that the world's out to get me, as I had less and less things to offer anyone, because all that I did was shoot dope, and that's all I spent my money on, that's all I had. You know what I mean? Like, I had my syringe, my sack, my pants, my shirt, and my shoes, and nothing else. There was nothing else that I had. So the less that I had to offer people, and then the more that it centered my mind around obtaining those drugs and everything, then I didn't even come with Brandon, the loving, creative ideas, happy, funny. None of that guy showed up. It was just the guy who his world revolved around getting drugs and alcohol, and how can you help me get these drugs and alcohol? And if you can't, then what the fuck am I doing? Like, what can you offer me? And that's how I interacted with people, and that was a huge problem. And it's like you finish the 4-step and you're like, wow, I really have no place to be mad, angry with anyone in my life, and maybe I need to possibly look into writing this same list down and make amends to these people and make it better. And I mean, it's just, like I always say this, it's like you really get that feeling of like you've cracked, like the Matrix, you know what I mean? Like you've cracked the code. I feel like I live in a different realm now. I'm just a completely different person, and I had to turn, I didn't understand exactly how to make it better. I didn't understand how to stop my behaviors that were so ingrained in me. And that's where I had to lean back into this humongous God universe that I've come to realize had this divine plan for me. And I had to decide to like let that divine plan take over rather than Brandon being in control of everything that ruins his own life. And what that looked like was I basically had to say, God, please remove this character defect. So here's a prime example. When you've been using drugs your whole life and you kind of go through life kind of like lying, like covering up one thing, this, and I mean, it was pretty evident, and towards the end, I wasn't trying to cover it up at all, but I had gotten in the habit of like showing up to a job, like, are you high? I'm like, no, I just haven't slept. And sometimes even making up a story. Yeah, we went to this thing last night, and then, so you're always having to remember all these lies that you told. And I don't want to go too off track, just so I can keep you focused on what the 4-step and, you know, turning it over to power greater than myself did for me. But I just didn't know. So like I remember early sobriety, I would start lying. And the cool thing about getting sober is you really, you know, if your program is really good, then you don't have to lie about anything. When you start kind of like lying and sneaking, that's, you know, or any of these old behaviors, you see them re-entering, it's like, all right, stop and then reassess. Do you need to go through the steps? Do you need to do inventory, spot checks? Are you working your program? Are you going to meeting? Are you reading the book? Are you working with other new alcoholics? Like those things that keep you on track. And the really shitty thing too about getting sober and getting years sober is people around you are like, don't you work this spiritual program? Like they expect you to be this something on a pedestal, and that's not. We are just human beings living a human experience. But I would lie in the early sobriety, and I could stop myself and be like, hey, I'm sorry. What I just said was a lie. I don't know why I'm doing that. And then even in my head just going, God, please remove that. Like, or while I'm doing it, God, what can I do to make this, like, why am I lying, God? You know, and the like, what seemed like insanity to me is, how do you fix this? Was you just stop, you say, I'm lying, I don't know why I said that, and then you tell the truth. That was way out of my realm to understand of how I lived my whole life. prior to that. And like I said, things like that started to change. I stopped stealing things all the time. Like I used to think like I should be able to go in the store and just take whatever that's mine. And you know, if you don't have food and you're on the streets and you're doing that, just know that, you know, in this cosmic energy, then maybe what you'll do is the cost of food with the inflation is theft goes into that. So now my living amends is I get to pay for people that are stealing so that those people that were in my shoes can go ahead and steal that food. I mean, and that's just what I do. I'm not saying that they're right for doing that, but I was that guy. So now I pay for everything. I don't want to go back to jail. I couldn't figure out why I kept going because I was stealing. But I couldn't figure that out. Me, myself, Brandon. I couldn't figure out that 1 + 1 = 2. I couldn't figure out if you stole and you got caught, you're going to jail. The system was out to get me. I didn't understand that if I was shitty to people and I didn't treat people how I wanted to be treated, they didn't want to be my friends. And I would say, fuck them. You know what I mean? So now I have this new way of living life, and it's all written out in this 4th step that I can go back and look at anytime I want, and I could realize my character defects. They're sitting right there on a piece of paper. I could read them out to another human being. He could be like, yeah, these are also some other character defects, and then I could go through that process of amends, you know what I mean? And through the process of amends, I get to have people like my father back in my life, my brother, my aunt Kathleen, you know, like all the people get to come back into my life, and I never have to do any shady, dodgy, moving, don't go to this place because this person's, I don't have to live my life like that anymore. I get to go everywhere I want to go. I get to interact with people that I want to interact with. When I'm wrong, the idea is to promptly admit it. Does that always happen? No, but I know that there is a solution to being wrong and interacting with people the wrong way. And I also get to realize that this life that we live is not always going to be easy. But it doesn't mean that I need to drink, use, escape, with whatever it looks like. With food, I mean, all these escape things I use, food's become a new one because your life gets bigger and it gets more stressful. And you know that you're not going to go back to using drugs and alcohol, or I know that I'm not going to, knock on wood. Like if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to go back using drugs and alcohol.